Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a horror comedy movie called Army of Darkness. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The film opens somewhere around the 1300s with a narration from a young man named Ash Williams, who introduces himself as a slave. He is currently bound in chains and is being dragged along with several other men, as Ash explains that his life was not always this way. The scene shifts to a flashback. It is the early 1990s, and a young Ash works as a simple clerk at a local mart in his hometown. He has a girlfriend named Linda, who is also a clerk at the same mart. One day, the duo takes a romantic vacation to a seemingly abandoned cabin in the woods. Inside one of the cabinets, they find a book called the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, or Book of the Dead. It is then revealed that the cabin's previous owner was an archaeologist, and he discovered the book during an excavation. Later, Ash plays a cassette of the professor reciting passages from the book. This recording contains several incantations, which unfortunately unleashes an evil force in the woods. That night, the evil spirits kill Linda and then go after Ash. They begin possessing him through the blood vessels in his right forearm. The poor man is forced to saw off his arm to prevent the sorcery from spreading across his whole body. But this does not end his ordeal, as the spirits continue to hound him. Bruised and alone, Ash searches the book for help and finds a spell to defeat the demons. However, when he chants the spell, a time vortex opens and he is sucked right into it, along with his car, a shotgun kept in the cabin, and the chainsaw that he used to cut his hand. The vortex transports Ash and the other objects to a vast, empty land in AD 1300. A few minutes later, he is surrounded by the Knights of Lord Arthur, a powerful king looking to rule over the entire British peninsula. The knights are confused, as Ash appears to be wearing clothes that seem strange to contemporary times. Therefore, they summon a wise man to find out exactly what's going on. Upon seeing the mysterious stranger and his car, the wise man says that Ash is the one who shall save mankind from the terror of the Deadites, as foretold in the Book of the Dead. Deadites are the species of undead parasitic spirits that feed on the souls of living creatures and possess their bodies. It is revealed that currently, several parts of Britain are being plagued by the Deadites. The wise man is certain that Ash is the solution to their problems. However, the captain refuses to believe such prophecy and thinks Ash is one of the Duke Henry's men. It turns out Duke Henry is a Scotsman at war with the English knights. The movie then circles back to the first scene, where Ash is dragged along with other captured soldiers towards Lord Arthur's castle. Upon arrival, several peasants and other ordinary folk cheer for their king. Among the crowd is a beautiful young girl named Sheila, whose brother is also a knight in the king's army. She cannot find her brother in the returning cavalry and asks Lord Arthur what happened to him. He gives her the solemn news that her brother unfortunately perished in the battle against Duke Henry's men. Sheila is left devastated, and in her anger, she grabs Ash by his hair, thinking he is one of Duke Henry's men. She spits on him and curses that her brother's death shall soon be avenged. Following this, all the enemy soldiers are taken to the center of the castle, where some sort of a pit is made. Duke Henry, who is also among the captured, approaches Ash in shock. He has never seen him before and is sure that Ash is not one of his vassals. Our hero begs him to announce the truth to everyone, but the Duke knows that his enemies will never believe his words. It seems like Ash is condemned to the same fate as the Duke and his men. Seconds later, Lord Arthur arrives at the castle grounds and chastises his enemy. He reveals that his kingdom has been suffering from the attacks of the Deadites, and Duke Henry took advantage of such a vulnerable time to sneak on them. He thus sentences Henry and his men to be thrown into the pit. Ash tries to tell Lord Arthur that he has never seen Duke Henry before and doesn't even know who he is, but they refuse to listen to his pleas and throw him into the pit. Ash fortunately survives the fall, as it is full of ankle-height water, but then an ugly-looking weirdo emerges from underneath the water's surface and begins attacking him. Just when it seems all hope is lost, the wise man from earlier arrives at the mouth of the pit. He believes that this strange man was sent to help them in the war against the Deadites. Mr. Wise has also brought along Ash's chainsaw, which was confiscated earlier. He throws it inside the pit, and Ash immediately fixes it to his right hand. Now laced with a modern weapon, he effortlessly slices his opponent into two. The sight shocks Lord Arthur, and he orders that the spikes be unleashed inside the pit. The soldiers then begin pulling a metal chain, which causes sharp spikes from both ends of the pit to narrow towards the prisoner. Fortunately, Ash uses his quick thinking and grabs the metal chain, which slowly pulls him away from the spikes and up towards safety. Seconds later, a Deadite appears from the walls of the pit. It grabs his leg away and is about to take a bite, but the spikes close in, shredding the monster to pieces. In the aftermath, Ash drags himself out of the pit and quickly regains his remaining weapon from the wise man. He uses his double-barreled shotgun to frighten the inhabitants of the kingdom. He intimidates a funny-looking man, and it's funny as fuck. He then frees Duke Henry, and the latter promises to repay the favor. Witnessing all of this, Lord Arthur bravely steps up to fight him with his long sword, but Ash casually shoots at the blade and rips it into two pieces. The gathered citizens are amazed by the sheer power of the modern weapons, and finally agree to listen to Ash. He reveals that he is not from their time, but from the future, and wants to go back without harming anyone. That night, as Ash is feasting on his newfound popularity in the kingdom, the wise man appears with some bad news. He reveals that the only way Ash can return to his time is by retrieving the Necronomicon, or the Book of the Dead. Only this powerful book contains the spell which can reopen the time vortex. However, Ash does not want anything to do with the book, as it is the reason he lost his girlfriend, as well as his right arm. He then urges the wise man to search for some other way so that he can return home safely. At this moment, an old servant lady who is standing nearby begins to have violent seizures. She transforms into a deadite and begins to float in midair. In a deep, monstrous voice, she announces that the humans shall never find the Necronomicon, and eventually all their souls will be preyed upon. She then drops to the floor, pretending to be dead. Lord Arthur naively approaches the old lady, but Ash stops him in the nick of time. The deadite then goes on a scary rampage, killing several soldiers, but Ash manages to put it down using his classic shotgun. In the aftermath of the attack, the wise man reiterates his point. If the deadites find the Necronomicon before they do, humans of all eras will be wiped out. This makes Ash realize that the situation is worse than expected, so he agrees to find the unholy book. As days pass by, the soldiers prepare special armor for the stranger's amputated right arm. Meanwhile, Sheila begins to fall in love with Ash, and even makes him a blanket for his travels. The night before he is supposed to begin his search, he's a dick to her, she slaps his face, and the two end up making love. The following morning, Ash leaves the castle along with the wise man and a few other soldiers, but they accompany him only to the mouth of a haunted road called the Road of the Dead. The wise man tells Ash to follow the road until he arrives at a cemetery. There, the Necronomicon will be waiting for him, and when he takes the book, he is supposed to speak a mysterious phrase. Klaatu Varaka Nito. The wise man asks Ash to repeat the words to be sure, and Ash says, "Those are goddamn words, alright." Following this, Ash takes his horse and passes through a haunted forest, but as he goes deeper and deeper into the woods, a mysterious demon begins to pursue him. This freaks out the poor horse and it starts running in random directions. It eventually collides with a tree branch and collapses to the ground. Now, without a horse and being pursued by a demon, Ash ducks into a nearby windmill for safety. That night, he notices his reflection looking back at him and approaches a mirror placed nearby, but the mirror is closer than he thinks and he accidentally crashes into it. Ash then grabs a broken shard and looks at his own tired face before throwing it on the ground. At this moment, three small reflections of Ash climb out from the shattered mirror and begin to torture him. He skewers one with a fork though. Green goblins, the little bitch's ass. They manage to drop him onto a metal sheet, knocking him unconscious. Then they tie him down, and one of the little Ashes dives down his throat. Seconds later, Ash's body is split into two fully grown humans from the waist up. The newly sprouted body begins laughing hysterically, which makes him panic. He gets up and runs through the woods, but the sprouted version completely splits off of his body. Now, there are two versions of Ash. One is evil and the other real. They then begin fighting each other, and it appears that they're equally matched. However, our hero eventually gains the upper hand and shoots his doppelganger in the face. He then drags the deformed body of his opponent back to the windmill, slices it to bits with his chainsaw, and digs a grave for it. But before he can bury it for good, the evil Ash opens his eyes and promises to come back for revenge. In the next scene, Ash reunites with his horse and finally reaches the graveyard, but to his shock, a huge tomb contains 3 books instead of 1. He opens the first book and almost gets sucked into a different dimension, but thanks to his metallic arm, Ash manages to cling onto the tomb and closes the book. He then opens the second book, only for it to bite him viciously. Fortunately, Ash manages to fight it off, and then grabs the real Necronomicon. But when he attempts to say the magic phrase, he realizes that he has forgotten the end of it. Ash tries to trick the book by mumbling the missing word, but that only resurrects all the demons that were buried in the graveyard. This scares him shitless, so he simply grabs the book and rushes back to the castle. After a while, the dead bodies and the demons arise from their graves and begin marching towards Lord Arthur's castle. Evil Ash also awakens and unites the Deadites into one single army of darkness. Upon his return, Ash hands the book to the wise man and demands to be returned to his own time. The citizens are happy that he brought back the Necronomicon, but the old man questions if he said the magical phrase before picking it up, and nervous Ash says he recited most of the phrase correctly, but the wise man knows he messed up. He then reveals that lifting the book without chanting the phrase correctly will unleash the army of evil Deadites onto the world. Ash apologizes for his mistakes, but remains adamant on returning back to his timeline. He asserts that he has fulfilled his part of the bargain by bringing back the book. Upon hearing this, all the citizens, including Sheila, lose respect for Ash as he is trying to run away in their greatest hour of need. As all of them are arguing, evil Ash swoops down on the castle on a giant bat-like creature and abducts Sheila. He takes her back to the graveyard and forces himself on her, ultimately transforming the innocent village girl into the evil queen of the dead. In the next scene, Ash sees the sorrow he has caused to the villagers who were depending on him. This eventually changes his mind, so he decides to lead the humans into war against the army of the dead. At first, he sends a raven to Duke Henry, asking them to join the battle against the common enemy. He then creates several explosive weapons, using knowledge from the mechanics and chemistry textbooks in his old car. 2 nights later, the army of the dead arrives at the castle doors, along with their leader, Evil Ash, and Evil Queen Sheila. A brutal fight then ensues between the two parties. Initially, humans gain control with their modern explosives and weapons, but soon, the army of the dead break through the main door and wreak havoc. They kill hundreds of humans, and it appears as if all hope is lost. However, Duke Henry appears with his army of Scotsmen just in time and turns the tide in the favor of the humans. In the meantime, Evil Ash rushes towards the insides of the castle to grab the Necronomicon. Ash follows him and the two engage in a fierce battle for the future of humanity. Our hero lands several good blows on his opponents, but since Evil Ash is a literal deadite, he keeps on coming back. Thankfully, Ash uses a weapon that his doppelganger doesn't have, a well-functioning brain. He brings out an explosive, stuffs it into the deadite's mouth, and launches him into the air using a giant trebuchet. This causes Evil Ash to be blown into thousands of pieces, and with his death, Sheila is finally freed from his spell. In the aftermath of this battle, Duke Henry and Lord Arthur settle their differences and sign a pact to never attack one another again. Meanwhile, the wise man recites a passage from the Necronomicon and gives Ash a potion to return back to his home. But to do so, he will have to recite the phrase Klaatu Farata Nikto. In the final scene, Ash recites the phrase and drinks the potion. Unbeknownst to him, he has taken too many droplets of the potion, and he gets transported to the distant future.